Hello, welcome to RECENTERED, a VR podcast. My name is Gary from the YouTube channel Immersed, and joining me is Rog, also known as Fleet Rogie. How are you, mate? What have you been up to?
I'm okay, thanks. It's been a bit of a PSVR OG week for me.
Yeah.
All the current news has made me break out my old PSVR. Bit of Resident Evil 7 because I've never finished it, so I thought, well, if I'm going to do it, I'll do it now.
So did you go back into any other games? Was it just mainly Resident Evil 7, or did you try Astrobot again? One of your favourite VR games ever?
Not yet, no. Oddly, I jumped into Paper Beast, which I've never played before. For some bizarre reason, I seem to own it on Steam and on PSN, so I presume it was a PS Plus giveaway at some point, and I must have bought it in a bundle on Humble or Fanatical or something. I just wanted to. I kind of sort of wanted to go back into PSVR just to get into my mind what the actual visual quality was.
Yeah,
because it's been so long, and so jumping into the same game on PC and PSVR, it's given me a good comparison. And bizarrely, I've been playing Ragnarok, the Viking rhythm game. That's become my go-to drop into something for 10 minutes.
Oh, right, okay. So what did you think of because I've not been back into a PSVR for God knows how long. I can't remember when I sold mine. It was a long time ago. But what were your impressions of the actual resolution and just image quality of that?
Well, I always had it in my head that the mirror effect, that sort of film that you could see over your vision.
Yeah.
I always had it in my mind that it was worse than actually it seems to be. I don't know. Maybe I'd built it up more and more over time with not using it.
It's just certain things, isn't it? I guess you see it quite a bit in Resident Evil 7.
Yeah.
But I can't honestly remember exactly what it was like. I remember it was there, and I didn't really have it in many other VR headsets. Bizarrely, I did try somebody else's Oculus Rift once. My Rift was absolutely fine, but bizarrely they had one, because it was made up of two independent screens, and one screen had really bad mirror, the other was perfectly fine, the same as mine.
Oh, no.
So it was obviously a defective one, but they just had no clue. They just assumed it was like this. So
yeah.
I
mean, I had two CV ones because my first one went back because it had the audio failure on one of the ears. That was the common problem back then, and both of my CV ones were absolutely perfect, no mirror whatsoever. And I've chatting to a couple of people on Discord as well, because Quest 1 was OLED as well, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah.
And from what I've heard, people have said that the Quest 1 didn't have mirror either.
No,
so
not on my. I didn't have any mirror on my Quest 1. That was something as well. So I mean, the Vive didn't really, the Rift didn't, but the PSVR definitely did. It wasn't really that bad, to be honest. It wasn't like it ruined the experience or anything like that.
Yeah. But going back to the PSVR, the other thing that sort of stands out, resolution aside, which, it's a low-res headset nowadays, but I can definitely see, and it's something that's always sort of bugged me a bit, and I can certainly see it, is the 60 to 120 hertz reprojection.
Yeah.
When especially if you sort of stand still and turn and use your analog stick to spin round.
Yeah.
You can see the projection, you can see the double image, and I know it's been a big discussion in the sort of VR community over the past week with some people saying, well, PSVR never had this problem. How come some people are saying that PSVR2's got this problem, and it's like, well, it's always been there. It's just I think some people just don't seem to be able to see it, and it's if you want to see it, load up Resident Evil. Open your inventory so you've got some text on the screen and just sort of sway from side to side, and you will see the text totally go out of focus.
Yeah.
In a double image. It's absolutely blatant. It's not I will say though, it's not put me off enjoying Resident Evil 7 at all. It's I've been having a blast with that, definitely.
Yeah, well, I think most, I don't know what percentage it would be, but a vast majority of PSVR, the original titles, all had this 60 frames per second reprojected up to 120 hertz. Yeah. And there were only a few really that ran at native frame rates, but it was just an issue. I think if you come from a PSVR and that was your first VR headset and you've not had too much else to compare it to, you probably won't even notice that anyway.
No, probably not.
But it's certainly something that I know. I usually test it if you've got something with motion controls where you've got your hands in VR and you can just raise a hand in front of you, just move it backwards and forwards, and you'll see the blurring, like the doubling up of the image as it reprojects. But it is an issue, and it's something which we'll get into anyway. We'll talk about PSVR2 hands-on impressions a little bit later on, but we'll get more into that, I suppose, later on. What else? So I think because you were talking about Tilt 5 last time, so give us an update.
So yes, I got my replacement set of glasses. The other set were picked up today, so I've got to give them props there. They sent out an advanced RMA, so I didn't have to send mine back and then wait to get another pair. They sent out a pair in advance with a prepaid box to send my other ones back with. So yes, slight improvement, I would say. If you sort of sat at it looking at it, as in you sat at a table looking at it, it's slightly less blurry than it was before. But I think overall there's not that much of a difference. The one thing that I did notice was with my original set, the first time I turned it on, and then a couple of times after as well, I could see it. Well, it'd take me, 2 or 3 seconds for my eyes to focus and kick into the 3D image, which I always thought was rather odd because they always advertise that because the light's bouncing back from the board, you're getting, a better focus on the 3D objects. It's one of their big selling points compared to VR, where you're always looking at a single fixed focus.
Yeah.
With my replacement set, I've not noticed that at all. Maybe I just got used to it. I don't know, but that seems to have gone away. But what I did do was actually put somebody in it for a demo for the first time, which I'd not done with the first set of glasses because I didn't know if they were faulty or not. I didn't want to give a wrong impression. So anyway, a mate of mine, Tim, who you've met at the RCM, sat him down. Well, he was stood over it, and if he put the glasses on, he was stood above the board, and his first reaction I can't repeat because we're keeping this podcast clean.
Yeah.
But it goes to show that if you're too far away, it's just terrible. The image terrible. Anyway, got him sat down at it normally, and let him have a play. And I did sort of sneakily record a few comments from him, which is very faint and crap. So I basically transcribed what he said afterwards, sent it to him on an email, said, is this what you said? Is there anything else you want to add? And he sent a few comments back. So this is from somebody who's never used it before, whose experience with VR has been sort of using all the headsets I've got. He's owned a CV1, a Rift S, a Go, and a Quest. I think he's currently still got his Rift S. He has problems with VR. He's got some vision problems which can cause it to be slightly sort of painful to him, so he sort of keeps dropping in and out of VR over time.
Okay.
That's his experience with VR. Anyway, so this is the first time he'd used Tilt 5. His comments were basically, you have to be right down on top of it to play it. I'm having to sit over it, and when I'm sat over it, it looks playable, but any further away from that, and it looks, and I won't say what he said it looks like. Bit later on, he says, it's not bad if you sat in the right position. And 10 minutes later, it became, it's impressive in that it's better than I thought it was going to be. It looks all right. It doesn't affect my eyes, which was a surprise to him because he thought it might strain his eyes as VR does for him.
Yeah.
So he said, I'm not having any problems with that. And he liked it for that. He thought it was visually comfortable. So he says it's definitely preferable on a comfort level. And he could definitely see himself playing with it if they sorted out these certain issues.
Okay.
Which were the definite issues. He said the board is a problem. He found it distracting, e.g. the sort of gaps and the splits in the board and everything, and the sort of texture you can see. He didn't like that at all. He also said it seemed a bit of a fuss to set up because, like me, I've got nowhere to permanently set it up. It's a large board. It's 1 meter long.
Yes, yeah.
So...
And the cable's short as well, isn't it? So that probably causes even more problems.
That's another, we never even got into that. But he says, there's definite issues. Seems a fuss to set up, and it needs to be more than it currently is. He said he wouldn't buy one. He says the resolution needs to be a lot better, as does the image quality, which the image and the resolution, he says, is just a way off of being like they are in VR, and the overall hassle with the board and the issues with the board are a real issue and they need sorting. So yeah, not. He liked it as an example of something new he'd not seen before.
Yes, yeah.
But not something to be bothered about buying unless it was drastically improved.
Does seem slightly more positive than your take on it, though, from what you've said there.
Yeah, definitely. Well,
yeah.
I mean, I'd say he's heard me moan about this thing for weeks now, so I'd set a low bar.
Yes, yeah. Well, that's what he said at the beginning. It's better than he was expecting, I suppose.
Yeah.
That's, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. If I was to try one now, because I've got all your comments rattling around my head, so I suspect if I was to try one, I might be, pleasantly surprised by it as well, maybe. But
yeah, maybe. I mean, since I got my original set, they've actually released a demo pack, and it also goes to show that creating something that's aimed at that product can be better than just haphazardly porting something over. Because the stuff I tried before, like that Chuck's Challenge game on Steam, it still looks absolutely horrifically bad. You can barely read the text on it. But somebody's just ported a game over. It's like with the DK1, where people were having to use really large fonts and things to make sure you could properly read things and whatever. And a couple of the early demos just hadn't thought about that at all, and I think it made it maybe even look worse than it actually is. A couple of some of the demos with the demo pack, actually not bad. I'm like, yeah, that's all right, but the resolution, man, it really needs to be better. These things are 720p, and they need to be 1440.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, at least now, one way or another, that you didn't have a completely defective unit. I know there were things wrong with your like the crackling. Yeah, in the audio and stuff like that. But at least the visual quality, if it's slightly improved in this one or not, the overall impression I'm getting from you is that you pretty much feel the same way as you did originally. But yeah, I mean, what do you think, like with a Generation 2? I mean, this is really what they've got to do, I suppose, like increase resolution. I guess they're well aware of the limitations of it at the moment, but if it's below a bar that as a technology enthusiast and as a VR user you would expect, I guess they've just slightly fallen short in some ways with the image quality on this. But some people seem to love it, or at least tolerate it for the image quality.
Yeah, I mean, some people can get on with it fine, but for me, like, I keep repeating this, but it feels like a DK1. It feels like as the Rift, the old DK1 Rift used to be, to compared to what we've got now. This feels like this is a DK1, maybe a DK2, compared to what it needs to actually be.
Yes, yeah. Okay, well, thanks for the update. Anyway, it gives us something to think about with that. But yeah, I mean, so you'll be sending your old headset back to them anyway, and you'll be keeping this one for a while, I guess, just to experiment with it a bit more, see what else comes out for it.
Yeah, I'm going to hang on for it for a while, see if anybody comes up with anything interesting. Maybe see what happens with Dragon Magic's rollable, replaceable mats.
Oh yes, yeah. So you won't get the gaps in the board in the same way that you get with the standard unit. So you'll get a solid mat.
I don't think they understand how massively distracting that is. Honestly, it's bad. It's just a bad idea.
Yeah,
it needed to be a rollable mat.
Yeah. Okay, well, yeah, keep us updated on that then, that side of things. If that does improve things a lot, then that'd be worth doing. I also wonder if image quality is related to the material quality that they're using on the board as well. Do you think that's a possibility? If they had better quality materials for the reflective surface, would that improve image quality, or is that not really factoring into the equation really with this, do you think?
I have no idea. I don't know enough about retro reflectors and projectors.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe. I mean, the guy seems to think that the rollable mat he's got has got a better image contrast. That it can show darker blacks and brighter whites. So who knows? Maybe.
Yeah. Okay, well, just moving on quickly then. So for me, this past couple of weeks, we've been playing Half-Life 2 VR mod, which we'll discuss later on in the show. I've also been playing a little bit of Walkabout mini golf after we spoke about it briefly at the beginning of the last episode. So I've picked up the Labyrinth course, and I'll probably pick up the other DLCs as well because, like you say, they're so cheap, you might as well, and each one is pretty high quality. I mean, that Labyrinth one, there was a lot more going on in that than I expected. So I do recommend it. It's a lot of fun, that game. I really like it, and it's grown on me. I haven't put a huge amount of time into it, honestly, but I'm finding myself getting more and more drawn to it now. But yeah, it's good just to put on and do a course, because the course will probably take you 20 minutes, maybe something like that. It's not too much of a commitment, and you can play VR for 20 minutes. So that's what I'm doing, is in like a quick blast, really. And then, of course, on Friday, you and I both went into the Tokyo Game Show VR experience. So let's get into that. Just quickly touch on this. So this is for the TGS. They did a downloadable VR experience that you can download on your PC or in your Quest to wander around this virtual exhibition, really. And we went in there. So what did you think, Rog? What were your first impressions of that?
Well, firstly, they named it incorrectly. They should have called it Virtual Hat Collector 2022.
Yes. You got really into that. You loved it.
Lies. Okay, maybe a bit too much. But in all honesty, I'm not entirely sure what they were trying to achieve, at least probably from an English point of view, because you go in there, large open sort of space, large open central area where you can go off onto different areas.
Yeah.
Advertising lots of different games. The problem being, mainly the advertising was watch a video in Japanese.
Yes, yeah.
And it sort of fails from that point of view, or at least from an English point of view, anyway. They did seem to put quite a bit of effort into it, really. I was quite surprised. I think we're both quite surprised about how large the actual sort of event space was.
Yes, yeah. I mean, the thing is, it was sort of a bit. There were two sides to this. I felt like it was quite impressive from a spectacle point of view. You go in, you've got these really large spaces, which they add in all of these quite intricate models and stuff like that. And, it's quite a pleasant place to just wander around, really, as well. But the other flip side of that, it seems that is where all the effort seems to have gone. Rather than providing more tangible thing to do in VR, you're basically wandering around and watching videos and getting stuff. That seems to be a lot of it. Not entirely, but that seems to be what they were really focused on. And we discussed this when we were in there as well. Like, they seem to have put in a fair amount of effort to create this application, but it seems like the actual content within it is a little bit lacking, unfortunately, which, to be honest, even going to the extent that they've gone to for 3 days or something like that you can actually go and experience this. It just seems a little bit bizarre, but for what it is, going with your expectations in check, I suppose. But for what it is, it was fine, really, and it was fun just to wander around and have a bit of a chat while all these things are going on.
Yeah, it killed an hour. I think the problem was it showed a total lack of imagination.
Yes,
all there was videos to watch. There was nothing really interactive. And then the 360 video, which I think just totally confused us both. There was. Do we know what that was even for?
No.
It was a virtual 360 boat ride for some unknown reason.
Yeah, I don't know what that was advertising. I don't know what it was. I think it might just be something they're throwing in just to have something different in there. But there wasn't a lot. There was no interactivity in it, and it placed you in a boat, and it was a 360 video for about 3 minutes. Really, that's all it was. Quite impressive, but for a pre-rendered 360 video. And I did actually go in on PC because we both tried this on our Quest 2 originally, and then I went into PC just to see, because there have been examples where on the mobile platforms they use 360 videos, whereas on PC and more high powered platforms they can actually give you not a pre-rendered 360 video but a real time sort of 3D experience. So I just tested that, but it was still a 360 video even on the PC version as well. But performance is something that we should mention as well, because the Quest 2 was struggling, wasn't it?
That's putting it politely. It was dire.
Yes.
We did find there was an option in the settings where you could turn it down from whatever high to medium for the sake of argument. Yeah. And it sort of turned all the sort of bloom effects off, and it did give you some performance back, but in places it was really struggling.
Yeah, I mean, there were times where you would get those black bars on either side as you turn your head. You've got the black bars where it literally can't keep up at all in the Quest 2. And and when I tried it on PC, of course, you didn't have any of those problems at all. It was a much more fluid experience. It looked better. But yeah, you're dealing with a mobile platform and those really big areas with quite a fair bit of geometry and stuff like that in them. It did sort of make sense, especially with it being a multiplayer title as well. So you got sort of network issues, which are probably causing more stutters and stuff. But we did find there were certain areas which were running okay, but for most of it, it wasn't that pleasant really on the mobile platforms.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. So lesson learned: if you want to collect virtual hats, use a PC.
Yeah, I'm sure you've got it ready to go for next year. I mean, I'd say I don't think you can try it now, can you? Is that right? Have they taken it down completely, or is it still available to have a wander around? I don't know.
I've not checked, but as far as I know, it was basically you could only visit it while TGS was actually on in Tokyo.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get into the show then, because it's not very often we get weeks where we get as much news dropping as we've had over the past couple of weeks. So we need to get into this and start talking about some VR. And the first thing we want to get into is, of course, the PSVR2 hands-on impressions that from media outlets. Pretty much every tech site seemed to get invited, and also Mike from Virtual Reality Oasis got an invite. I think, to my knowledge, he was the only sort of YouTube sort of VR content creator that got access to the PSVR2.
Pretty much.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. But so he put out a video that was, it was good. It was great video coming from a VR enthusiast. But I'll be honest, I think some of the videos that I found most interesting, just due to my sort of the inclinations of what I'm interested in mainly, were the ones by the articles by Upload VR and Road to VR. Ben Lang and David Heaney got into quite some in-depth detail about some of the hardware and sort of the software limitations and stuff like that. But there's a lot of videos and there's some great ones. The Eurogamer video was great. What were your highlights on the videos, of all the videos and articles that you watched and read?
I mean, Ian Higton's Eurogamer video has got to be, if you want to go and watch just to get hyped about it, I think that's definitely the one. Yeah, but he deserves a shout out just for being such a proponent of VR all the years. On a normal gaming site, he sort of championed VR for years now, and I can't think of anybody else on a normal media gaming site that actually does that. Outside of the sort of VR space.
No, that's true. And this is a thing as well. You listen to all these sort of mainstream gaming podcasts and media outlets and that kind of stuff, and they've used VR, and they've probably in some cases used it quite extensively, but probably not to the extent that a lot of his enthusiasts have used it. And it comes across, you can clearly see where they it's not that they're necessarily getting things wrong or anything like that, but they don't seem to focus on some of the things that we might want to be focused on. And Ian Higton did do quite a lot of detail at the beginning of that video as well, in terms of like the hardware, giving us an overview and close-ups of all the hardware as well, which I thought was great.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you could see how excited he was, even sort of booping the photograph setup that they weren't supposed to touch. I mean, he's really into his VR, and if you want to see, if you want to see excitement about it, that's the one to go and watch. And yeah, I'm definitely hyped for it. The downside being, which I suppose we can get into, is what got mentioned by Ben Lang and David Heaney, and to a lesser extent the reporter from The Verge, Victoria Song.
Yes, yeah.
So it seems that the downsides from the first system, which I were hoping they'd got rid of, are still there. In the fact that if you're using the 60 FPS mode to upscale to 120, you're getting that blur, persistence, double vision, whatever you want to call it. I know David Heaney called it distracting. Ben Lang said there was a blur when you rotated around.
Yeah.
I think they both mentioned that they could tell that there was the Miura effect there, and even the reporter from The Verge, who didn't seem like she really knew that much about VR, she basically described Miura without knowing what she was describing. She said it felt like there was a textured layer between you and the game, or to put it another way, it felt like her contact lenses had dried up.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, the Miura thing is something that a few people mentioned. And yeah, that was on the original PSVR. Now, this is something that I don't even know if everybody would have noticed. You know, if once again, if it's one of your first VR headsets, the PSVR, you might not even notice it. It's really apparent on sort of very dark scenes and that kind of stuff, where you've got and David Heaney sort of described this as a fixed pattern noise, which it's sort of a pattern which is sort of embedded on the screen. So as you turn your head, you can still vaguely see this pattern, even though the world moves and you've got these objects moving over the pattern. And again, you probably won't notice this in brighter scenes or anything like that, but you will notice it in darker scenes, where, you know, in other ways, the OLED actually really shines in some ways. So it's a bit of a downside, but it's not something that some people will even notice, I suppose. So the Miura, what were your impressions overall on the PSVR One Miura? I know we spoke about it briefly at the beginning, but how did you get on with that?
Playing over this past week, I've seen it occasionally, but it's not as bad as it really isn't as bad as I recall it being. The thing with the PSVR now, the downside more than anything, what I noticed is the resolution. That's the limiting factor, definitely. And I've been swapping between PSVR and Quest Link to PC over this past week, and you can see when you jump back to Quest, you can see a definite visual clarity. I'm not even talking about the resolution, but you can tell that Miura isn't there.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't. There's nothing between you and sort of the virtual space. Where even when you don't notice it on PSVR, I think there's something just there that you can tell. But it's the resolution more than anything on PSVR. The Miura, I don't think it's going to be too bad. The 60 to 120 Hz reprojection, I just hope a lot of the developers don't use it. If they go for the native 90 FPS at 90 Hz, or in some cases maybe 120 FPS at 120 Hz, the reprojection issue's gone.
Yeah.
Dial back your graphics, give us a totally smooth frame rate locked to the actual, the refresh rate.
Yeah, I would definitely take that, but it does make me concerned. This is probably one of everything that came out of those videos. This is the one thing that I think is the main point of concern for me, where I don't think that it's the worst thing in the world having that 60 frames per second reprojected up to those 120 hertz for the headset. I don't think it's the worst thing, but it's a distraction, and I would always rather take a lower graphical fidelity and have native frame rates. And this headset, the PSVR2, can run at 90 and 120 native as well. So I would personally take that. The other thing, I mean, with the one, it's like when I tried GTA 5 mod, that used alternate eye rendering. So when you, it basically displays, so if you run it at 120 frames per second, you'll get sort of 60 in one eye, 60 in another eye, and it will swap over. And it gives a very similar effect to this sort of reprojection kind of blurring. That's what it really feels like. That's how it translates in terms of like user experience. And I did notice that if you use the reprojection at 120 frames per second rather than 90 frames per second, it's diminished. You don't get it as much. So, of course, with the original PSVR and with the PSVR2, where you're doubling up to 120 hertz, it's not as bad as having sort of reprojection in something like 90 hertz or 80 hertz or something like that. So that's a positive. And again, I don't think everybody would notice that, but I think that if you do notice it, it can be distracting. And David Heaney mentioned it was actually difficult to focus in on text unless you kept your head completely still because of this ghosting. And I wonder if, because Ben Lang mentioned this, and I didn't read the whole of Ben Lang's article, honestly, but I think he mentioned a persistence issue as well, which I don't know if he was describing, if that was sort of the same thing, or it went along with this reprojection blur and it made things difficult? Do you know what he said about that at all?
I don't know if he was trying to describe the same thing or not. The quote was, though it's generally quite sharp, I did notice what appeared to be a good bit of persistence blur on the PSVR2, which causes the world to get somewhat blurry when rotating your head, and this struck me as perhaps an issue with the display's low persistence function. So whether he is actually talking about, blur because of persistence, or he's talking about the 60 to 120, I'm not entirely sure.
No. Well, we'll see about that. And the other thing, so I think I mentioned before at the beginning, the original PSVR, probably 90% of the games use that 60 to 120. I just hope, like you, I hope that the PSVR2 developers will opt more for the 90 native. But I suspect in order to get games looking as good, in order for sort of promotion and marketing videos and stuff like that, like with the Horizon, looks incredible. But that is definitely one of the titles which is using this 60 to 120. And that's, they're using combination of things, the foveated rendering, I assume, but also the reprojection in order to get it to look that good. So I with the PS5, they've got this option, haven't they? They have options in games now, getting closer to PC, like where you can choose sort of fidelity over frame rate or vice versa. And I wonder if they could provide options in the menu system for this as well. I suspect they probably won't, but that would be a good idea.
It's an interesting thought, because especially with a lot of the PS5 patches, you'll often get a fidelity mode or a performance mode where you'll maybe get 60 FPS running at maybe 1440p, or if you want a true 4K output, you run it at 30 frames a second.
Yeah.
So it's getting you do get more of a choice nowadays with consoles, or with more modern stuff.
Yeah, and I think that particular issue, it's less. I think with PS5 and flat games, people are more used to talking about frame rates or 4K. With VR, it's a different ask of a general consumer to select those options in a menu. That's the only thing that makes me think they probably won't provide that option, but it would be great if they did, honestly.
Definitely.
So we spoke about a couple of the issues. I think generally, of course, pretty much all the videos and articles were overwhelmingly positive on this headset, weren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's worth pointing out, because some people have taken uploads, or, Heaney's comments, and just run with the negative comments and he doesn't know what he's talking about, which literally somebody actually said, which is, come on. But if you actually read his entire article, right at the end, through the beginning, he lists like the haptic feedbacks, the feel, the view, what it's like to wear, the impressive visual quality, the flawless controller tracking, and his summary is, this is still the most immersive consumer headset I've tried to date. So despite the fact he's pointing out flaws, he still thinks it's the best consumer headset he's ever tried.
Yeah. And the interesting thing, like the tracking as well, that is sort of a point of concern that I had for a while now, where you think Meta, Oculus, Facebook, they've put all of this R&D into these tracking, this inside-out tracking, to give us a great experience on the Quest. But we know that there have been problems on Windows mixed reality headsets with controller tracking, especially in terms of the volume. So that was always a point where I was a little bit concerned about that. But luckily, that seems to be no issues at all. Nobody seemed to report that. In fact, Mike from Virtual Reality Oasis tested the tracking from sort of a gun position kind of point of view, where there was sort of somewhat obscuring of one controller in front of the other, and it seemed to have no issues with that even. So these are all great signs from that side of things. Yeah,
it sounds pretty flawless.
Yeah,
I don't know what else you can say. There's nobody had any issues at all. The only one thing was Heaney, where he actually said, he looked straight up at a spotlight, which caused it to lose tracking. But even he qualified that with, you're not going to have that problem in your home.
No.
He was pushing the unit to try and get it to break.
Yes,
and he managed to for a second by looking at the studio light.
Which honestly is what I want from people giving hands-on. I want them to try all of these things, and I also want them to report on these frame rate sort of the way they are solving to get this graphical fidelity by leaning on reprojection. I think it's important to know about that stuff. Whether it bothers you or not is another question, but I think it's important to know that. And so very positive overall. I'm excited. Here's the thing. So the weird thing is, last week before all these videos dropped, I got my Valve Index box down from my attic, ready to pack my Valve Index away and sell it. The odd thing is, after watching these videos, and I can't even point to why, I'm slightly less... I don't want to sell my Valve Index yet, and I want more hands-on impressions. I honestly want to try the PSVR2 before I buy it. I think that's really what I want to do. I don't know if they'll have demos set up. So even though pretty much everything was positive, I've got this hesitancy, and there's a couple of things. So, I'm going to really be nitpicky and critical for a few seconds here. The first thing is the headset it looks quite bulky. Okay, now this is not really an issue. I'm being very nitpicky, I know. I don't care how I look when I'm playing VR. I couldn't care less. But at the same time, we're moving into different generations of VR headsets now, and I start to think about where the original PSVR came out. It was a great VR headset for that time, but it started to age very quickly. Now, I don't think the PSVR 2 will age like the original PSVR did, but I do think there are certain attributes which limit it, honestly. I think it's bulky. Most people probably won't be bothered by that. I'm not really that bothered, but it's something to point out. The other thing, lack of integrated audio. This is a bigger one for me. I understand why they've done it to keep costs down, and honestly, a lot of it is to do with compromises with this headset. They need to keep the cost as low as possible, but I think integrated audio is a nice thing to have because it just removes a layer of friction when playing VR, and I appreciate any headset that has integrated audio, and we'll probably get aftermarket things anyway, so that's another thing. And finally, the cable, which, I'm told constantly, just get over the cable. It's got a cable, get over it, which Paradise Decay says that to me all the time, actually. But I can understand that point. I could take that point. It's got a cable, and we have to live with it. Again, it's compromise based on they need to keep the costs down. They also want to deliver the highest possible fidelity, so it has to have a cable at this moment in time. I just find a few of these things are just a little bit of a shame. It's not a deal breaker. It's not going to stop me from purchasing it, but it's worth pointing out just from my point of view. Are any of those sort of issues for you, Rog?
You know what? It's got a cable. Get over it.
Yeah. Fair enough.
It honestly doesn't bother me. It really doesn't. I'll take image quality over wireless still at the moment.
Yeah.
I've been using AirLink for the first time since I think it was launched. Back when it first came out, I just could not get it working properly. And I've still got exactly the same setup, same router, same install of Windows, same everything. And I tried it again for the first time in ages this week, and it blew me away with how well it worked.
Yeah,
I literally couldn't believe it. It's improved so much. It was proper shocking. It's really impressed me. But you can still see it. You can still see the limitations of it. You can still see not the actual compression, but I think the resolution. And maybe I could use the debug tool and maybe try and turn that up a bit more.
Yeah.
But it's not as good as using the link cable, definitely, which really impresses me now. Again, that was something that I just couldn't get on with when it first came out. It was too buggy. But now that seems to work fine. It seems to work fine for me.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
So as far as the wireless versus cable thing goes, give me a cable until you can 100% deliver every single frame to my headset without it dropping one. And then I'll take wireless.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with that. And part of me, the reason I'm saying this is more because I don't want an Airlink kind of solution for a PSVR 2. Definitely not. I would much rather take a cable over that. But part of me wondered if Sony had something up their sleeves, like a special proprietary wireless system where it would deliver lossless image quality and stuff. But again, all of those kinds of things, it costs money, and for a headset they need to keep costs down. So it makes sense. I am being nitpicky. I know I am. It's just sort of I'm talking from in an ideal world. Really, these are the kinds of things that I would like. And just quickly, actually, before we move on to the next thing, you did mention, because AirLink and the wired link, I went backwards and forwards between these two after we spoke a little bit about it after last episode, I think it was. And yeah, you're right. I mean, there is a difference, there's a definite difference. And because I generally just use AirLink if I'm using my Quest for PC content, just out of convenience, I like to do that. But there is a difference with the wired link for sure. And it's if I do eventually sell my Valve Index, then that probably will be the way I play PC content. And but yeah, AirLink is a great solution. It's a nice, convenient solution to play PC VR, especially if you've got a dedicated router. It works really well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
For like, if I want to play something what's just like pick up and play for 10 minutes, and it's a PC title, then yeah, AirLink's a definite option for me now. Whereas if I'm going to sit down and play something for an hour or two, I'll probably just plug the cable in.
Yeah, it makes sense. Well, speaking of Quest, we've got the next big news story. Sorry, did you want to speak any more about PSVR2? Is there anything else you wanted to mention? I don't think we've touched on absolutely everything, so if there's anything else you wanted to...
I'm just sort of looking through the comments, what people made, and I think the haptics is another thing what's really going to differentiate it from everything else. Some people said they could sort of feel it, and it's a bit bizarre, that one. A few people said, it made a bit of a difference, and you could tell, especially with with the head haptics. Where I think it was Heaney and I can't remember who else it was. There were a couple of people who really commented about the Star Wars Galaxy's Edge Enhanced Edition, where you were using one of the tools and rotating the tool, and he said you could really feel the tool in your hand clicking as you rotated it.
Yeah.
That was it. Another quote from Heaney. He says, if you thought precise haptics would just be a gimmick, think again.
Yeah.
So that really impressed him.
Yeah, this is something which I've got zero experience of because I don't own a PS5, so I don't know how that changes the gaming, like the controllers and stuff like that, which I've heard a lot about, and everybody seems to absolutely love that side of things. So I think I'm probably underestimating how much of a difference that will make in VR, really.
Yeah, quite possibly, because the Astrobot demo, what you get with PS5, is still the standout sort of demo for haptics, and it really does show you what it's capable of. And transferring that into VR where you're physically manipulating stuff, I think that's going to be really something.
Yeah, because haptics just doesn't seem to be used a lot on I mean, you get like a buzz or something like that when you're touching certain objects and things, but it's not like it's not really focused on as much. So it would be great to get an experience where it is. And I always remember with the original Vive, going back a long time, I always remember the lab, the bow and arrow thing, the archery little mini game that you've got in there. For some reason, I don't know why, I think the haptics were pretty basic on the original Vive controls, but there was something about that. There was something tangible about that, and I always seem to go back to that for some reason. I don't think I've even tried it on my Valve Index, so I should probably try to see how the haptics hold up. But
I can't remember if it was the lab demo or if it was the Oculus Home demo with the bow and arrow, but one of them, it gave you a real... It did something when you pulled the string of the bow back, and it really felt like you were pulling that string.
It was that. It was in the lab, the archery. It had this thing, so it would sort of vibrate gently and get more and more the more tension you put on the bow. But yeah, I don't know why I always seem to focus on that in terms of haptics. So yeah, the PSVR2, of course, it's going to take things like that to the next level. And yeah, I don't want to come across as a PSVR2 hater, by the way, from what I've said so far, because I am still really excited for it. And the overall image quality that people were talking about just seems to be absolutely next level as well. I mean, especially if you're coming from an original PSVR, which probably, some people will be, but a lot of the people that used it are, very experienced with a variety of VR headsets, and they all seem to say that this was, real clear graphics. So aside from some of the issues in terms of text and the half frame rate issues, but I think the overall clarity that people were seeing in there seemed to really impress them. And they said, I can't remember who said this, but they said it was somewhere between a Quest 2 and the Reverb G2.
Yeah, I can't remember who it was either. It might have been on Upload during one of their live chats. I can't remember.
Yes, yeah, that's possible actually. So yeah, but because I've tried a Reverb G2 and it's, I mean, yeah, there's no question that's probably, it's up there in terms of the clearest headsets I've used, but it's got disadvantages with the lenses. That's the issue with the Reverb G2. Still a great headset, but yeah, I mean, that is really impressive. In the centre of that lens, how clear that thing gets is incredible, really. So getting a close sort of approximation to that on a console-based VR headset with the level of graphics the AAA developers can give us in something like Horizon will be great to experience.
Absolutely. I mean, they've got my money. As soon as the pre-orders go live, I'm going to be refreshing those websites trying to get one. I want one day one. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I wonder how readily available they'll be. If they'll be, like the PS5 and pretty much every piece of tech at the moment, it's difficult to get your hands on one. I wonder how much stocks they'll prepare for the pre-orders.
Yeah, this is the thing, isn't it? I mean, I'm hoping there's sort of a large online retailer over here who, when Sony originally announced the price, but not the original pre-orders, they did their own pre-order scheme. And I was on the website at the time, just in case Sony said pre-orders are now live. Yeah. They didn't do that. But one of the retailers over here in the UK, they did their own pre-order right at that point. Right. It was like, put a quid down and you're in line. So I did that straight away.
Yeah,
and I got my PS5 day one, so hopefully I'm hoping they'll do something similar.
Yeah, that'd be good. Okay, well, we'll have to wait a little bit longer before either of us gets a chance to try PSVR2, but it's exciting. Things seem to be moving on that side anyway, so we'll keep a close eye on what Sony are doing with PSVR2 and also with the game announcements that are probably going to start coming a little bit more as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next news story we wanted to discuss it's an odd one. It's the MetaQuest Pro leak. So the quick story around this is that basically somebody left a MetaQuest Pro in seemingly retail packaging in a rubbish bag outside of a hotel room, and the person that found this, the member of staff that found this, instead of just throwing it straight out, they thought it felt a little bit heavy, so they checked inside and they found a MetaQuest Pro in there. Unfortunately, this person was also a Quest 2 owner and a VR enthusiast, so he knew exactly what it was. A lot of combinations of things going on there. I think there's some people out there that seem to think this was sort of some kind of fake leak or, a controlled leak by Meta or something like that. I can't really see that happening because he subsequently posted photos online of this, and then later on when it was returned to the rightful owner who came back to collect it, they also posted a video showing sort of the contents of the box as well, which it shows it off, but it's not in the best way. I don't think any company would want their new product to be shown off in that way. So yeah, what did you think of this? What were the first things that you thought of when you saw this?
How bizarre, how utterly bizarre. I mean, my thought, whether it was fake or not, was I don't think so, because all they achieved in doing was getting a few images out and a bit of a shaky video.
Yeah.
Okay, it got people talking about Quest Pro, but if there weren't people talking about Quest Pro, they could have just released some control photos and some video of it, and everybody would have been talking about it anyway.
Yeah.
It just seems, too much of an effort to go to. And I think was it Upload who interviewed the guy?
Yes, Ian Hamilton on Upload did an interview.
Yeah, and I mean, well, as far as I could tell, he seemed pretty genuine. Although somebody pointed out the games he mentioned that he was into seemed to be a bit odd, like Arizona Sunshine at this point in time. Come on.
Yeah, I didn't pick up on that, but yeah, that's I don't know. It seemed genuine to me. I can't see this being a fake leak or anything like that. I think it was, the only thing that would make me think that is if Meta were trying to copy something that Apple did by accident, with the iPhone 4. So that's the only thing that. But it came just a few days after Mark Zuckerberg posted that photo of him wearing the Quest Pro, but sort of slightly off camera. You could see bits of it, but it wasn't a full shot of it or anything like that. So I don't know why they would have gone to that trouble and then got somebody to do this. No. But anyway, I mean, what came out of this is that we've got somebody who is a VR enthusiast, a Quest 2 owner, picking up the headset, and they did give some impressions on the upload video, which, I recommend people go to watch that just to get a little bit of insight and just to see the guy speak about it. And he said it was heavy, it felt premium. He didn't turn it on or anything like that, so we don't know too much else really. It was really just a video and some photos of a headset which we've seen sort of approximations of this in sort of leaks that Brad Lynch has done and stuff as well.
I mean, it pretty much verified the sort of CAD files and designs that he'd shown before. Everything from these photos and videos lined up with the CAD images that Brad had shown before. So
that's true. Yeah, that's worth pointing out actually. Yeah, because all the front-facing cameras and stuff like that was all pretty much in line with those CAD files. So it looks like those were genuine. Pretty much everything we're seeing was genuine, and it's part of me. I'm not a huge fan of these kinds of leaks, really. I know it's exciting to get some news about it, but it's like the GTA 6. Did you see that? All the massive leaks of GTA 6 that have happened. It does take a little bit of the spark away when you finally get a big announcement and stuff.
Yeah, I know people jump on it because they're desperate to see it and everything. The GTA stuff, I mean, I never finished. I finished GTA 4. I didn't finish GTA 5. I mean, I think it's a good game. It's impressive. But, I'm not the world's biggest GTA fan, so I honestly didn't even bother looking at any of the GTA 6 leaks.
Yeah. But was there anything else that came out of this MetaQuest Pro leak then? So we know the packaging looks very similar to the Quest 2.
I was just about to say this. The biggest thing that came out of that Quest leak was that Meta need to hire some new graphic designers because they really can't design a box.
Yeah, there was people saying...
the artwork, anyway.
Yeah, there was people saying it's a bit confusing for consumers, and... on the one hand, I can understand that, but also, the price is just going to be so vastly different from a Quest 2. They're not going to be confused for very long, I don't think.
I mean, it's like the original Quest. The box for that, if you remember, the artwork for the box for that got leaked ahead of time. And
did it?
There were a load of us sat there saying, "Oh, it's fake. Look at it. It's terrible." And it wasn't. It was the real thing. It's like, oh, come on, put some effort in.
Oh right, yeah. I can't remember that to be honest, but I think a lot. I don't think there'll be that much confusion, but I mean the box is pretty basic for what it is. It's got the same kind of design as the Quest 2, really, and this is the thing. There were people that were commenting that this doesn't look like a professional product in this box or anything like that, but I don't think they really care about that, and it's not really like an end. To me, this is not an enterprise product. Primarily, it's still a consumer product, but it's a different kind of consumer product, focused around productivity and that kind of stuff. So, I think they're positioning this to be like an iPad. Is an iPad got ultra professional packaging? I suppose it has in some ways. So, but I don't know. I don't really care that much about the box, but it's very similar to Quest 2.
Yeah. Well, going on to the productivity side, they've announced an actual proper, I can't remember what they call it, basically an dedicated AirLink dongle.
Yeah.
So you can use AirLink without having to use your router and everything. I know there's quite a few people saying, are they going to, is this a sign that Meta's refocusing again on gaming because they want to give you a quality, PC gaming link? No, they want to give you a quality view of your desktop for productivity. That's all that is.
Yes, yeah, I agree. I think there's two sides, because to me the Quest Pro will be the iPad equivalent, really. That's how they see this device. The iPad is consumer, but it's consumer productivity and can certainly be used for work applications as well, and for enterprise applications if they want to. But they're still primarily focusing this on a consumer product, and it will still play all the Quest 2 games as well. So just a quick question for you. Like, we don't know the price. We strongly suspect it's going to be expensive, $1,200, $1,500, £1,500.
Yeah.
Those are the rumours. Is that just... Do you have any interest in picking this thing up?
Not at that price. The thing is, I want it to either... for them to go sort of like... reverse the decision, and for them to drop it between... If they dropped it between $600 and $800, I'd be like, yeah, go on. If they dropped it at $1,500, I'd be like, no, I'm sorry, that's way too much. I just can't afford that. If
Yeah.
it came out at maybe $1,100, that puts it in a horrible position of it's affordable, but I don't want to spend the money.
Yeah. No, I think I'm with you, really. I can't justify the cost. I think that's what it
No.
comes down to. I just can't justify that cost. For this kind of product, I would absolutely love this to replace my Quest 2. I want to experience the smaller form factor. And, you know, these pancake lenses and tiny displays and stuff, and get that better form factor, and to experience that with those controllers as well, which have the cameras. So you've got that completely different kind of tracking on the controllers, which will help. Honestly, one of the reasons I want that is to play pool games and snooker games and stuff like that, because you just can't do it in an easy way in the Quest 2. Just incidentally, there is a quite nice little pool game on App Lab at the moment. I forget the name of it, but it's very polished and very good.
Black hole one, is it?
Yes, yeah, I think it's that one, yeah. But yeah, it's really good, and they've done a great job on the tracking with the Quest 2, but it's just not quite there for me. And of course, having these kinds of controllers will make it possible to play something like that. But yeah, it's just too expensive for what it is. I can't just. That's what it comes down to. Even if I could afford it, I don't think I could justify spending that much money on what is going to probably generally be used for a majority of the time the same as what my Quest 2 is being used for.
Yeah, the money I've got money saved up for a PSVR2. It's been sat there a while now, and you know, that's my headset money.
Yeah. Okay, go on.
So I was going to say, unfortunately, with every passing day, I sort of think, have I put enough aside? I'm currently thinking for 499 quid.
Yes,
I think it's going to be really expensive.
Yeah, I know. I think I'm sort of each week my estimations go up, because like I say, I was going to sell my Valve Index, and that probably still be the way I'll finance the PS5 and the PSVR2. It won't cover it, but the money I'll make from the Valve Index will go towards that. But I'm just thinking, the longer I leave it, I'll get less for my Valve Index presumably, and also the cost of all of this hardware just keeps into going up anyway. And it's got to be. I don't see how they can go above $499 really. I think in some ways they could justify it, but I don't think it's very difficult when the console is only, it's around that £500, isn't it? The PS5 now.
It's 479 for the disc version.
Yeah,
I'm not sure. I'm not sure about the digital version.
I can't see how they can go above that cost. It's a difficult ask, and maybe they will. Maybe they'll give it a try and see, because I don't think it will stop people buying it. Honestly, if they do that, I think people are really looking forward to this, the PSVR 2.
Yeah, I think it's going to sell out. Simple as that.
Yeah, it will. Okay, so yeah, Quest Pro leaks, check it out, but hopefully we'll get some more information on the Quest Pro officially sometime next month at MetaConnect anyway. But the other quick headset news, bit of hardware news that we want to mention this week, is the Somnium Space VR One headset, which was, it was announced, I think it was last year sometime. They sort of made an announcement, but then they've updated it now. We've got some more details on exactly what this headset is going to be. So we've got some specs. It's a sort of a collaboration with 3D printer maker Prusa. I think that's how you pronounce that, Prusa Research. And then the VR Engineers, which are the creators of the Xtal VR headset, which is sort of a very, very high-end, wide field of view headset, many thousands of pounds, and it's used really for sort of pilot training and more industry focused applications really, because it costs something like, I don't know the cost, I think it was something like £4,000-5,000, something like that, but it's very expensive anyway. And so this collaboration with those two companies and Somnium is to create the Somnium VR One headset, which is an open source VR headset. And the specs of this are, it's got a Snapdragon XR2. I won't go through absolutely everything on this list, because there's a big list of specs on the website and the Medium post they put out. But it's got a Snapdragon XR2, the same as the Quest 2 and the upcoming Quest Pro. It uses Wi-Fi 6E, so it's standalone, but it can also be tethered to a PC either through a cable or through wireless. And Wi-Fi 6E is the same that is used by the Nofio headset for the Valve Index as well. So it's got a better form of wireless than something we would be used to on the Quest 2. So it's got inside-out tracking, all of these other things basically as well. It's got micro SD card expansion. It's got a good field of view of 120 degrees, horizontal, vertical, 100 degrees field of view. And also, importantly, it's got very high resolution. 2 displays at 2880 by 2880. Which, it's sort of matched up to something like the Vario Aero, something like that. It's up there. So it's got very high resolution displays in there. So this is open source, and it also looks like you can sort of print out your own version of this. I presume they're going to allow people to just sort of modify the design, print out new versions, and all of these other things. It's an interesting headset. I don't think we've seen anything exactly the same as this before. I think there have been attempts at open source VR headsets previously, but go ahead.
There has back in the DK days. There was the Razer OS VR HDK 1 and 2.
Right, okay.
Which was the open source VR headset. And because it just reminded me, the Somnium headset just reminded me of that back in the day. And I actually went and just had a bit of a Google about what happened to that. And I think basically nobody really bought it. Maybe there are a few sort of like hacker types out there who got into it. But bizarrely, I don't know what it was, but the FAQ for that old headset was actually updated last week.
Oh, right.
I couldn't say what they'd updated, but apparently it was.
Yeah. So, I mean, I remember vaguely hearing about an open source VR headset years ago. I don't know if it was that one, or is that the only one you know of that tried to take this approach?
It's the only one that sort of springs to mind. There were lots of headsets about back then, but ones that you could actually buy and get hold of. The Razer one is the only one I can recall. Yeah,
I think with this particular headset, the specs are really high. It's got, it looks like a great headset. We don't know a price on it or anything like that. It's probably not going to be super cheap or anything. I don't know if they would position this to compete against a Quest or something, especially when it's designed by the VR engineers, the Xtal headset, which is hugely expensive, but it's very high end for specific use cases. It's not a consumer headset at all. That one's not. But I don't know what we expect the price for this one to be.
I mean, it's anybody's guess, isn't it? The other thing as well is like, who's going to buy it?
Yeah,
it's maybe if it is easily moddable. You can say you're going to get that hacker maker mental, crowd sort of, doing weird or wonderful things with it.
Yeah.
But for your mainstream sort of audience, for your mainstream gaming audience, they won't even know about it. I think that's the problem anybody's got. If you're not Meta, if you're not Sony, it's like people really haven't, or Valve, people haven't heard of your headset.
Yeah, and that's true. I can't imagine who will buy this really necessarily unless we get more information on it and it explains a bit more. But the thing, I should mention this at the beginning as well, with Somnium Space, for anybody that isn't aware, they sort of do this application called Somnium Space, which is kind of like a persistent social open VR world, something like Neos or something like that, really. But it's a different kind of that, and it's a persistent VR world as well. You don't go into separate instances, as far as I know, for different buildings or things like that. It's completely persistent. There are different instances of that world, of course, to get different users in, but as far as I know, it's sort of tackling it in a slightly different way. I've been in there and it's interesting. I'll be honest, I like these VR social metaverse kind of things. I've not spent a huge amount of time in. I've not spent a lot of time in VR Chat, Neos, or Somnium Space. So I can't really speak too much of that, but part of me wonders if they're using this hardware, first of all, to, of course, draw attention to their their application platform, which is probably what will generate some money for them. But also if it will be designed specifically to take advantage of something within that as well. Could there be some kind of sort of bespoke additions to this headset that will make it particularly useful for users of Somnium Space? I don't know, but
maybe, but I can't see what. Maybe it is attention to, because don't they sell virtual land?
Yes, they do. Yeah. They sell virtual land. They also to the best of my knowledge, they sort of focus on NFT art as well and things like that in there.
Right.
So
okay.
yeah, I mean, I don't want to go into that too much because I don't really know to the extent of that. I know that the guy from Somnium Space, Artur, he was on Next Dimension podcast that I was on as well, and we spoke about it, and we went into Somnium Space with him, and just on desktop, because you can access it through desktop as well and experience it, and it's it's a good thing, but I just don't know enough about it, and I didn't spend long enough in there to really have an opinion on it, honestly. But a new VR headset, regardless of all of that stuff, it's interesting to get, especially one that's got high specs. I think we all want those high specs.
I mean, I'm sure we all want to see what a headset, was it 2800 by 2800? That's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, it's very high. I'm pretty sure that's, if not the Vario Aero resolution, it's very close to it.
Yeah.
So that's interesting, if nothing else. But we'll see. We'll see what happens with it, because we've only really got a spec sheet at the moment, and of course these collaborations with more, they've got a lot of collaboration with these established VR headset makers. So it does look like this will be coming out at some point, or whether it will be consumer focused or not is another question. Okay, well, we're going long. So I said originally when I was going to do this podcast that I was going to try to keep it to around 45 minutes per episode. It's not always possible when we've had news weeks like this where there's been a lot of stuff to talk about. This is occasionally we're going to have longer episodes. But to finish off this week, we do of course want to talk about Half-Life 2, the VR mod, and our impressions of it. I've put in probably about between 2 and 3 hours. I've got to the airboat section. I'm just playing through that section at the moment. But Rog, you've played some of this as well. What do you think?
It's all right.
Fair enough.
It's pretty much what I was expecting it to be, in all honesty. It works well, it plays well, apart from getting off the ladders, which I'm still struggling with. Apparently there is an option you can turn ladder climbing onto your analog stick, and that sorts it out, for what somebody was saying earlier. But the actual physical climbing up the ladder thing, you get to the top and it's like, oh man, I'm a total newbie here. I'm failing.
All I do, I mean, the technique that works for me now is where you get to the top, you keep on grabbing the last rung of the ladder, and then you just point the stick and hold the stick in the direction you want to exit. The problem with that, it seems to work, but the problem with that is sometimes you'll sort of fly up high in the air. You'll go really high and you'll still land and you won't die or anything, but it's just a slightly janky way of exiting, I suppose.
Yeah. I think it's really good. It's impressive what they've done, and I see they're going to be coming out with like a lighting edition, to improve things there, as well as textures and whatever. Although people have been using a specific texture mod, I can't recall the name of it.
Is it the Essentials?
Maybe.
I think there was a. Yeah, I might be confusing.
It's version 0.9. That's all I can remember.
Okay.
But it's basically what I thought it was going to be. It's Half-Life VR, and generally speaking, it does it really well. I think the only problem I have is I've played it so many times in the past. It's it's not surprising. I even played it in VR back on the DK1.
Yeah.
So it's okay. Yeah, this time there's motion controls. You've got manual reloading, etc. But it's good. If you've never played it before, then I think you're in for a bit of a treat. Yeah,
it's pretty much what I expected as well. The thing to point out with this is it's still classed as it's now a public beta, so it's not the finished product necessarily or anything like that. Yeah. So for me, if I'm being honest about it, it was slightly more of a janky experience than I was expecting at this stage, based on what I'd seen in some other videos about it, where people got access to the closed beta. So I felt it was slightly more janky, but it also didn't help that I played it originally on my Valve Index, where it's, there are fixes for this, but using the grip controls on the Index controllers, it's not a great way, because you find just by holding the controllers just lightly, you'll still start picking things up just by wandering past them. So, you can adjust grip sensitivity and things like that. So I'm sure I could have worked my way around that, but when I played it in the Quest 2, it was a better experience out the box. And yeah, there's still certain points which are janky, and also not every interaction is perfect. You go through doors with a button press again, which this is a VR mod. I'm not complaining about any of that stuff, so it's fine. And also, yeah, you've got the manual reloading of the guns, again a little bit janky to do that. The actual putting the clip in is fine, but then you have to sort of touch the offside of the gun to load it in the chamber, and it just doesn't. Sometimes I can't get that to always work, and I got a little bit frustrated with that at certain sections.
I must admit, I didn't have any issues with the reloading. I thought it worked really well.
Oh, it's probably me. I'm rubbish at that kind of stuff anyway, so I'd probably be rubbish if I did it in real life. But the overall really impressive anyway. In spite of those few little problems, I think it's fantastic. And it looks really good as well. This is the thing. How old is this game, and how good does it look?
Wow. I mean I can't remember how old it is. It's ancient, really, in gaming terms. And I mean, it runs shockingly well. Yes. I mean, I maxed everything out. I played it over Airlink, and it was all but flawless. And any issues there were was just Airlink. Yeah. But saying that, it worked great.
Yeah, I played over Airlink for most of my time in there. How far have you? I know you've played it quite a few times. I've not actually ever finished Half-Life 2 in my life, right. Believe it or not. So
I've not got to the airboat section yet. So you've got further than right. I have.
Yeah, I mean, I've played it quite a fair way through before, but I've never actually finished it. Although I do know the story of Half-Life 2 because I wanted to prepare myself before Alex. So I do know the story and where it goes and what happens, but I've never finished it, so I'm going to push through. I'll probably keep it just rolling along in the background. I'm not going to rush it or anything. I'll just take my time with it. But yeah, really impressive, and I'll definitely be trying these sort of graphical improvements as well. They keep posting some pictures of these graphical improvements. So yeah, I'm looking forward to trying all of that.
Yeah, definitely. I'll probably hold off until they get that lighting fix out, and maybe the texture pack, or maybe I'll just download that other texture pack that's available. Yeah,
there's a few things, and also it will still be getting updates anyway in the background. So hopefully it will become slightly less janky in the small places where it is at the moment as well. But yeah, really, really good, and I'll be playing that for a while, I think. Okay, well. Is there anything else you wanted to quickly mention before we end the show?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay, well, that's been RECENTERED episode 2, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks. Hopefully we'll have some more, another long show, because we'll have plenty more news to discuss, but we'll see what happens. We've also got a few ideas for some special one-off episodes that we're rattling around at the moment. If we get a quiet news week, then we'll probably pull out one of those episodes, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks, I suppose. But thanks very much for listening, thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Cheers, everyone.